Agis IV was born into the Eurypontid dynasty of ancient Sparta at a time when the legendary city was poisoned by decadence. Having grown up in the hands of luxury, he chose to practice the old laconic lifestyle of temperance and simplicity as had been established by Lycurgus the lawgiver hundreds of years earlier. This became his inspiration to restore the city to its former glory. In 245 BC, Agis became king of Sparta at the age of 20, as he saw how the wealth of the city had been in the possession of a handful of Spartan citizens. He created a new economic plan to reverse this trend. Among his proposals were the redistribution of land for disenfranchised citizens and the cancellation of debts. While the younger Spartan men were supportive of Agis and his vision, the elders were opposed to him as they possessed most of the wealth in the city. Leading the opposition was Leonidas II, the Spartan king of the Aegeid dynasty. At first, Agis had the support of all the poor citizens and of a few influential elders. With the assistance of Lysander the Ephor, he managed to have Leonidas exiled on the grounds of having produced children through a foreign woman. But when Agis was called to assist in a regional conflict against the Aetolians, his uncle, Agesilaus, began to undermine his efforts back in Sparta. Agesilaus managed to get the proposal of debt cancellation passed quickly, but had continuously delayed the passing of the proposal to redistribute the land. When Agis returned from his campaign in northern Greece, the incompetence of Agesilaus had allowed Leonidas to recover his kingship and regain control of the city. Now regarded as an enemy for his failed reforms, Agis was forced to shelter in a temple to Athena for safety. Shortly thereafter, he was captured by his friends and placed in prison, where the Ephors conducted a mock trial and sentenced him to death by strangulation. Thus, Agis IV died in 241 BC as a man whom historians describe as an idealistic yet impractical monarch for a city that was deep in cultural turmoil. Upon the death of Leonidas in 235 BC, his throne was passed down to his son, Cleomenes III. At this time in Sparta, all authority was held by the Ephors, as there was no king from the Eurypontid line to assist Cleomenes. Because he had taken the widow of Agis as his wife, he learned about the reforms that Agis had wanted to pursue. But before he could take up these reforms, he needed to motivate the Spartans to support him, and a war with the Achaean League was deemed the perfect pretext. In 229, the Achaeans, led by Aretas of Sicyon, challenged the Spartans for control of the Peloponnesus. Though he was inexperienced, Cleomenes led the Spartans to 3 major victories in the early years of the war. This gave him the confidence to eliminate the Ephors and implement his reforms without any resistance. The most notable of these was the redistribution of land between the Spartans and the Perioeci, which inflated the population to 4,000 fully constituted citizens. Sensing the recovery of Sparta into a powerful empire, Aretas decided to call upon Macedon to halt the ambitions of Cleomenes. By 224, the Spartans were on the defensive. Most of the cities they had recently conquered fell under the control of Antigonus III of Macedon. Though the Spartans won a minor victory at the city of Megalopolis, this was quickly followed by an overwhelming defeat for Cleomenes at the Battle of Salacia in 222. After this disaster, the king fled to Sparta, where he advised his people to surrender to Antigonus. Then he and his friends sailed to Egypt to join up with Ptolemy III, who had aided their cause during the war. The pharaoh had promised to restore Cleomenes to Sparta, but his sudden death put a halt to this plan. The new ruler, Ptolemy IV, was deceived by his officials and had the Spartan king placed under house arrest on false charges of usurpation. In desperation, Cleomenes and his friends broke free from their prison in 219 BC and tried to turn the Egyptians against their ruler. But seeing the futility of their efforts, the Spartans chose to end their lives by suicide, preferring death over captivity in a foreign land. With the death of Cleomenes, Sparta would never again rise as a significant power in the Peloponnesus. The last of the true Spartans had finally met his end, and now we shall turn our attention to their Roman counterparts. Born to a plebeian family of high repute, Tiberius Gracchus was the elder of the two brothers renowned for their land reforms in the Roman Republic. In 147 BC, he began his career as a soldier in Africa under the command of Scipio Aemilianus. 10 years later, he was elected quaestor and served in Spain under the consul Hostilius Mancinus. During this time, the Numantines forced the Romans out of the territory, and only Tiberius was trusted to handle the surrender. The Romans returned to Italy in disgrace, but this unfortunate affair did not stop Tiberius from pursuing the office of plebeian tribune. In 134, he won his election, and upon entering the office the following year, undertook the task of halting the misappropriation of public land by the patrician class. At this period, the plebeians of Rome were being cheated out of opportunities to own land, resulting in an overall decline in society. Though Tiberius had the full support of the citizens, he was staunchly opposed by the patricians, who benefited the most from buying up the public land. As a result, they called upon the tribune Marcus Octavius to oppose him in his endeavor. Unable to pass his legislation without a unified vote by all the tribunes, Tiberius proposed a measure that called for Octavius to be removed from his post. The measure passed, and the land reforms were subsequently passed without further resistance. The controversial act of depriving a man of his elected post, combined with his promise to be re-elected tribune to propose additional reforms, made the enemies of Tiberius yearn for his death. On the day of the tribunal elections, Tiberius arrived at the Capitoline Hill to oversee the counting of votes. Viewing this as a subversion of the Republic, the Pontifex Maximus Scipio Nasica called on the Senate to stop the elections. When this failed to generate action, he rallied a group of senators to attack Tiberius and his supporters. In the street fight that ensued, Tiberius was killed, and his body was thrown into the Tiber River. As the citizens were frenzied over the incident, the Senate chose to maintain the land reforms. Even so, Plutarch notes, this was the first occasion since the abolishment of the Roman kingdom that physical violence was used to influence the political balance in Rome. At the time of Tiberius's murder, Gaius Gracchus was serving in Spain under Scipio Aemilianus. When the news of his death reached him, Gaius chose to remain quiet about his political intentions to avoid sharing the same fate as his brother. In 126 BC, he was elected quaestor and served in Sardinia under the consul Orestes, where he proved himself a man of upstanding character to the dismay of the patricians. All attempts to prevent his ascension to the plebeian tribune failed, and Gaius was elected for the year 123. As tribune, he followed in his brother's footsteps and proposed several laws for the improvement of the state. Among his proposals included the distribution of public land and the reduction of grain prices for the poor. These reforms made Gaius popular with the plebeians, and he was elected tribune a second time for the year 122, despite not officially running in the election. During his second tribuneship, he faced multiple challenges from the Senate to undermine his reforms. His proposals to give voting rights to the Latins and resettlements for the Romans were skillfully opposed by the tribune Livius Drusus. Combined with his half-hearted attempt to establish a Roman colony in Carthage in the same year, it was clear that the popularity of Gaius was on the decline. After losing his third tribuneship for the year 121 BC, his enemies targeted his reforms in an attempt to provoke him and justify their ambitions to kill him. When a servant within the Roman Forum was accidentally slain by supporters of Gaius, the consul Lucius Opimius took this as an opportunity to purge the city of his influence. On his last day, Gaius and several of his supporters were chased out of the Forum by the partisans of Opimius down to the Tiber River. It was here that the former tribune chose to end his life by suicide to avoid his capture and execution. Over the next few weeks, around 3,000 of his supporters were killed. Their bodies were discarded into the Tiber, and their properties were subsequently sold to the state. Ironically, the land reforms Gaius had passed were left untouched by the Senate, just like the reforms of Tiberius after his death years earlier. Going forward, the use of violence against political opponents became a standard practice in Rome, which was effectively demonstrated through the civil wars of Sulla, Caesar, and Octavius.